You're not addicted to trading. You're addicted to being right. You think you're addicted to trading. You think it's the charts, the setups, the action. But that's not it. This is not financial advice. What follows is a personal story, a journey through the emotional, mental, and practical landscapes of trading. Nothing here should be taken as a recommendation or instruction to trade. Every trader walks a different path. This is mine. What you're about to hear is a story. Not of someone chasing trades, but of someone chasing control. A journey that starts with strategy. And slowly becomes a war against the self. What you're chasing isn't a trade. It's a feeling. The feeling of being right. And buried inside that feeling is your ego. The part of you that needs to win. That needs to be in control. That cannot accept uncertainty. This video is not about how to trade better. It's about how to see yourself more clearly. So that you can finally trade with peace. You'll hear 15 chapters. Each one is a window into what really drives your decisions. The thoughts you hide. The emotions you justify. The patterns you repeat without knowing why. There will be stories. Experiences from other traders. And from my own life as a coach. And in each chapter, a few simple practices that might help you slow down the spiral. You won't find secrets here. But you might find truth. So take a breath. Set the strategy aside. And let's begin with the real reason trading feels so hard. It's not because the market's unpredictable. It's because your ego is fighting to be right. In a place where right doesn't exist. Chapter 1. The illusion of control. At the beginning, you believe you're the one in charge. You mark your levels. You study your setups. You wait for confirmation. You feel prepared. And then the market moves. And it doesn't care. It slices through your plan. It triggers your stop by a tick. It reverses the moment you get out. It ignores the rules you thought it followed. And deep down, something inside you resists. You feel wronged. Cheated. Punished. You don't realize it yet, but your ego is screaming, I should be able to control this. That's the illusion. That if you learn enough, watch long enough, plan hard enough, the chaos will obey you. That somehow, you'll find the code that makes the market respect your expectations. But the market doesn't operate on respect. It doesn't care how long you studied. It doesn't care if you were due a win. It doesn't care if this trade had to work. It just moves. It follows no one. And if you try to force it, you'll lose more than money. You'll lose your center. You'll lose your patience. You'll lose the very thing that makes you a trader. Your clarity. I once coached a trader who used to rewrite his plan mid-session. Not because the setup changed. But because the market wasn't doing what he expected. So he'd shift the lines. Tweak the entry. Ignore the stop. By the end of the week, he wasn't trading the plan. He was trading his frustration. He wasn't adapting. He was trying to regain control. By any means necessary. And every time he clicked the mouse, it was less about strategy. And more about ego. Control feels good. It feels safe. But in trading, control is an illusion. You can't control what the market does. You can only control how you respond to it. That's the shift. That's where power actually lies. Not in prediction. But in preparation. Not in being right. But in being ready. So how do you break the illusion? First, start saying it out loud before each session. I don't control the market. I control myself. Simple. But grounding. Second, write down your plan before the open. And don't change it mid-session. If it fails, it fails. That's where trust begins. And third, catch yourself in those tiny urges, the need to re-enter right away. The panic to get back what was lost. The mental bargaining. If I just size up on this next one. That's not clarity. That's the illusion talking. The more you try to control the market, the more it controls you. But when you let go, when you stop needing to be right, you finally start seeing what's true. And that's when trading begins. Chapter 2. The need to win every day. There's something about the daily chart that traps us. You look at your history. You see the red day. It stings. Even if it's small, even if it was part of the plan. It still feels like failure. Because somewhere along the way, you started believing that a good trader is one who wins every day. That if you were really skilled, if you were really disciplined, there would be no more red. But that belief? It's not about edge. It's about ego. It's the need to feel in control. Every day. It's the need to feel validated. Every session. It's the fear of facing a day where your plan didn't work, and having no one to blame. One trader I worked with used to size up on Fridays. Not because the setup was stronger, but because he couldn't accept ending the week red. He needed to close it green. Emotionally. To walk into the weekend on top. But week after week, those Fridays became his worst. Because he wasn't trading his plan. He was trading his ego's need to win. And slowly, he began to understand the red day wasn't the problem. His reaction to it was. Needing to win every day creates pressure. And pressure shrinks your ability to think. It pushes you into hesitation, overtrading, revenge trades, and late exits. It clouds your view. It warps your goals. And it traps you in a cycle that feels like performance. But is actually insecurity. You don't grow by never losing. You grow by learning how to lose well. That's the truth nobody wants to hear. That a professional is not someone who avoids red days. It's someone who handles them. Cleanly, calmly, without tilting. So what can you do? First, shift your metric. Instead of asking, was I green today? Ask, did I follow my plan today? One leads to obsession. The other leads to freedom. Second, zoom out. Track your performance weekly, or monthly. Not daily. The game isn't won one day at a time. It's won over hundreds of sessions. Most of which won't be perfect. And third, remind yourself red days are part of the edge. Even a system with 60% win rate will lose 4 times in 10. Losing is not failure. Breaking your rules is. You don't need to win today. You need to trade well today. Because that's what makes you consistent. And consistency, not perfection, is what this game is built on. So take the pressure off. Let today be what it is. Win or lose, walk away knowing you acted like the trader you want to become. That's a win no chart can measure. Chapter 3. When a trade becomes a personal battle. There's a line you cross. Most traders don't notice it until it's already behind them. One moment, you're focused. You're trading the plan. The next, something shifts. You're in a trade, and it starts going against you. Not violently. Not explosively. Just enough to make you uncomfortable. You should exit. Your stop is close. Your rules are clear. But something inside you says, no. Not like this. And just like that, it's no longer a trade. It's a battle. You stop seeing the market. You start seeing yourself in the position. Your conviction. Your pride. Your belief that you're right. And now, you have something to defend. This is the moment ego takes the wheel. It doesn't yell. It doesn't scream. It whispers. You know this trade should work. You've seen this setup 100 times. Don't let them shake you out. But here's the truth, you're not defending the setup. You're defending your image of yourself. You don't want to feel wrong. You don't want to admit that the market did something unexpected. You don't want to exit and feel like a loser. Even for a moment. So you hold. You justify. You add. Not because the trade is valid. But because your ego can't take the loss. I remember a trader I worked with who took one setup every day. Just one. He was precise. He had edge. But every time his setup failed, he would re-enter. Same level, same idea. 3 or 4 times. When we talked about it, he said, I know the setup's done, but I can't let the market beat me at my own game. That sentence said it all. It wasn't about the strategy anymore. It was about being right. Even if it meant breaking everything that had made him consistent. This is how a good trader becomes a chaotic one. By turning a chart into a mirror. By turning a trade into a test of self-worth. But the market isn't testing you. It's not your enemy. It's not trying to humiliate you. It's just moving. And when you turn it into a battle, you lose the only thing that matters. Your neutrality. So how do you step out of the fight? First, learn to spot the shift. The moment when emotion enters. The moment when exiting feels like surrender. That's not your intuition talking. That's your ego asking to win. Second, pause and ask one question: if this trade wasn't mine. If I were coaching someone else. What would I tell them to do right now? That question removes your identity. It puts you back in the seat of logic. It breaks the spell. And third, keep your loss small. Not just in dollars. In time. The longer you stay emotionally tied to a position, the harder it becomes to walk away. And the more damage you do when you finally do. You are not the trade. The outcome doesn't define you. You don't lose value when you take a loss. In fact, walking away is the victory. Because that's what makes you powerful. Not proving you're right. But proving you're free. Chapter 4. The seduction of being the smartest person in the room. Some traders don't need the thrill. They don't crave the action. They crave the feeling of knowing better. They want to outthink the market. They want to predict the next move before anyone sees it. They want to be first, sharp, ahead of the crowd. They don't just want to win. They want to win cleverly. And they don't even notice when the goal shifts. Because at first, it's strategy. It's research. It's curiosity. But slowly, the mission changes. It's no longer about building edge. It's about proving superiority. These are the traders who go deeper than anyone asked them to. They dissect every tick. They second-guess every pattern. They rewrite their system weekly because it wasn't smart enough. And they often feel frustrated. Because the market isn't rewarding their intelligence. It doesn't care how deep their backtest is. It doesn't respect how clever their thesis sounds. Because this game doesn't pay you for complexity. It pays you for consistency. And consistency doesn't come from brilliance. It comes from discipline. I once worked with a trader who had 2 degrees, years in finance, and a brilliant analytical mind. But he struggled. Not because he didn't understand the market. He understood too much. Every trade became a thesis. Every pullback became a debate. He couldn't execute simply because simple felt stupid. He was addicted to insight. And because of that, he was constantly out of sync. He was right. Just never at the right time. And what hurt most wasn't the losses. It was the feeling that the market was beneath him. And still winning. Ego wears many faces. Sometimes it shows up as pride. Sometimes as anger. But sometimes, it shows up as intelligence. And the smarter you are, the more dangerous it becomes. Because you can justify anything. You can twist logic. You can talk yourself into or out of any position. Not because it's valid. But because you can't bear to feel wrong. So how do you escape this trap? First, simplify. Take pride not in how clever your system is, but in how well you follow it. Second, set boundaries on your analysis. Decide in advance what data matters. And what's just noise dressed up as wisdom. And third, remember being smart means nothing if you can't sit still. Being right means nothing if you can't manage risk. This game isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the clearest. Clear mind. Clear rules. Clear exits. That's how you win. And that's what intelligence looks like. When ego isn't running the show. Chapter 5. The ego behind overtrading. When traders talk about overtrading, they usually mention discipline. They say it's about patience, control, waiting for the right setup. But that's only half the story. Because beneath the surface, overtrading is rarely just about impatience. It's about ego. It's about proving you're still in the game. Proving you still have control. Proving, most of all, that you still know what you're doing. And when the market isn't giving you validation, you try to take it. Trade after trade. Click after click. Trying to find a version of the day where you win. Even if it means breaking everything that made you calm. It starts small. You take one trade. It doesn't work. You feel the sting. But instead of stopping, you feel the urge to correct it. To recover. To rewrite the story before the day ends. And suddenly, you're not trading a strategy anymore. You're trading a feeling. The feeling of wanting the market to validate you. And it never will. Because the more you chase it, the more you spin. I once worked with a trader who took 35 trades in one session. When we looked back at the chart, he could only justify 4. He wasn't unaware. He wasn't blind. He just couldn't stop. Because stopping felt like failure. Sitting still felt like giving up. Doing nothing felt like being powerless. And that was the truth of it. Overtrading wasn't the issue. The issue was his discomfort with powerlessness. He needed to feel in control. And placing trades, even reckless ones, gave him that illusion. But the irony is, the strongest traders don't need to act to feel strong. They can sit. They can pass. They can wait 3 hours, 3 days, a full week. Because their identity doesn't need a trade to feel real. That's what ego doesn't want to hear. That your power doesn't come from being active. It comes from being intentional. So how do you quiet that voice? First, define your session limit. Not just a loss limit. A trade limit. If you can only justify 3 clean entries per session, then stop at 3. Even if you feel good. Especially if you don't. Second, pay attention to your state. Not just your setup. Ask yourself, am I trading because it's there? Or because I want to change how I feel? That single question can break the cycle. And finally, journal the moment you want to overtrade. Describe the emotion. Describe the thought. Get to know it. Because when you bring awareness to ego, it loses power. You're not weak because you feel the urge. You're strong when you learn to sit through it. That's real control. And that's what separates a trader from someone just pushing buttons. Chapter 6. When winning is a need, not a bonus. There's a difference between wanting to win and needing to win. Most traders don't see the line until they've already crossed it. At the beginning, winning is exciting. It feels like progress. It feels like proof that you're learning, that the work is paying off. But somewhere along the way, winning becomes something more. It becomes emotional fuel. It becomes the thing that makes you feel worthy, capable, in control. And once that shift happens, you stop trading with clarity. You start trading with need. You need the win to feel okay. You need the win to undo the loss. You need the win to silence the doubt that's building in the back of your mind. I once worked with a trader who told me, "I can't go to sleep unless I finish green." That sounds like discipline. But it's not. That's not a system. That's desperation dressed as hustle. Because when winning becomes the way you measure your value, you'll do anything to avoid a red close. Anything to avoid the discomfort of loss. Even if it means breaking your rules. Even if it means taking trades that don't exist. Even if it means risking everything to make a few dollars back. That's the danger. When winning is no longer just a result, but your emotional oxygen. You're not building a business anymore. You're managing self-worth. And when the market becomes your therapist, you'll never stop trading long enough to hear what's really going on. So what's the shift? It begins with understanding that winning is a side effect. Not the goal. The goal is execution. The goal is process. The goal is to make decisions that match your edge. Whether or not the outcome agrees. That's how professionals think. They don't need the market to reward them every day. They need to follow their process every day. The rest takes care of itself. If you feel the need to win, notice it. Say it out loud. Write it down. Because once you name the pattern, it starts to loosen its grip. Then, ask yourself, can I sit with this discomfort without fixing it? Can I feel the red and still walk away clean? If you can do that, you're already further along than most. Because the trader who needs to win is always a few losses away from disaster. But the trader who knows how to lose and stay centered is the one who survives. And survival is everything. Chapter 7. The destructive power of needing to prove yourself. No one talks about it, but it's there. Behind the setups. Behind the journals. Behind the charts you screenshot and send to your friends. That quiet, gnawing need. To prove something. To yourself. To your partner. To the people who didn't believe in you. To the ones who did. The market becomes more than just a screen. It becomes a stage. And suddenly, your trades aren't just trades. They're performances. Proof. A way to say, I can do this. I am good enough. But trading was never meant to carry that weight. It was never meant to fix your past. It was never meant to validate your identity. And the moment you start asking it to, you stop trading with clarity. Because now, every loss is personal. Every win is validation. Every decision becomes about how you'll feel afterward. Not whether it was right in the moment. And when you're trading to prove yourself, you don't trade what's true. You trade what feels impressive. Big size. Fast flips. Overconfidence masked as conviction. And it works. For a while. Until the market humbles you. And you're left not just with a loss, but with a story that no longer holds you up. I remember a trader who told me, I'm not afraid of losing money. I'm afraid of being seen as a failure. That was it. That was the whole reason he couldn't follow his risk plan. Not because he didn't know how. Because losing felt like exposure. It meant someone, even just himself, would think, you're not who you said you were. This is the most dangerous kind of pressure. Because it comes from the inside. And no amount of money can make it go away. It's never enough. The account grows. And so does the fear of losing it. The win comes. And it's followed by an even deeper need to prove that it wasn't luck. You're chasing peace through performance. And that's a chase that never ends. So what's the antidote? It's not easy. But it's clear. You stop asking trading to be your mirror. You stop trying to use results to fix what's unresolved. You start with a truth most people avoid: you don't need to prove anything. You need to be honest. You need to be consistent. You need to build a system that works. Not one that impresses. And most of all, you need to give yourself permission to be human. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to lose. You're allowed to grow slowly. Because real traders don't prove themselves with one trade. They show up with discipline, over and over, when no one's watching. That's what proves everything. Chapter 8. The trap of thinking you've finally figured it out. There's a moment that feels like a breakthrough. You string together a few good trades. You follow your plan. You hit your daily target, maybe even more. And it feels easy. You're calm. Focused. In control. And then, the thought creeps in: I've got it. I finally understand this game. It doesn't feel arrogant. It feels earned. You've put in the hours. You've done the work. But quietly, without realizing it, something changes. You stop questioning. You stop refining. You stop preparing with the same intensity. Because part of you believes the struggle is over. That you've moved past the pain. That you've figured it out. But that belief, that illusion of mastery, is one of the most dangerous phases in the trading journey. Because the moment you think you've arrived, you stop protecting what got you there. And ego loves this part. It rewards you with confidence. It tells you, you can size up now. You don't need to double check that level. You've evolved beyond stop losses. Until the market humbles you. And it always does. I worked with a trader who had a 3-week winning streak. It was the best stretch of his career. He felt invincible. So he relaxed his rules. He entered early. He added size. He stopped journaling. Within 4 days, he had erased 3 weeks of gains. And more than that. He couldn't understand how he fell apart so fast. But the truth is, he didn't fall apart. He just stopped being a trader. He became a believer in himself. Instead of a student of the market. And that's the trap. This game doesn't care about your progress. It doesn't congratulate you for a good month. It doesn't go easier because you figured it out. The market resets every day. And so must you. So how do you stay grounded when things are working? You build rituals around success. Not just struggle. You double down on discipline after a win. You review your process harder when it works. And you remind yourself today's clarity is not tomorrow's edge. It must be renewed. Protected. Respected. Every day. Because the moment you believe you've mastered the market is the moment you stop mastering yourself. You didn't figure it out. You aligned. For a little while. And your job is to keep doing what brought you there, long after your ego tells you it's no longer necessary. That's how you grow. Not with breakthroughs. But with humility that stays. Chapter 9. When ego hides behind confidence. Confidence is necessary. You need belief to pull the trigger. You need trust to sit through the noise. You need conviction to follow a plan no one else believes in. But there's a fine line between confidence and ego. And most traders don't see when they've crossed it. Because ego doesn't always show up loud. It doesn't always yell or brag. Sometimes, it just feels like certainty. Like knowing you're right. Like feeling you see something the rest of the world missed. It tells you you've evolved. You've outgrown stops. You don't need confirmation anymore. And because it sounds like confidence, you believe it. But it isn't strength. It's blindness. Real confidence is quiet. It doesn't rush. It doesn't chase. It doesn't need to be proven. But ego? Ego rushes into the market before the plan is complete. Ego sizes up when you haven't earned it. Ego enters because the last one worked, not because this one is valid. And then, when the trade goes wrong, you don't adjust. You justify. Because to change your mind would feel like weakness. But it's not weakness. It's awareness. I once coached a trader who said, "I'm confident enough to hold through the pullback. This level will hold." But it didn't. And he didn't exit. He added. Then again. By the end of the session, his loss was 5 times larger than his normal risk. When I asked him why he didn't stop out, he said, "Because I trust my read." That's what confidence looks like. But that wasn't confidence. That was ego pretending to be strong. The hardest part of trading is knowing when you're lying to yourself. And ego is the best liar you'll ever meet. It knows your voice. It uses your logic. It speaks in your tone. And if you're not grounded, you'll confuse its arrogance for clarity. So how do you tell the difference? Here's a simple test. Confidence stays calm before entry. Ego feels urgent. Confidence accepts when it's wrong. Ego defends at all costs. Confidence respects risk. Ego believes it's the exception. If your decision feels fueled by needing to be right, it's not confidence. If you feel a flare of pride when you enter, check your ego. Because true confidence isn't about certainty. It's about being prepared. Even when the outcome is unknown. You're not here to be unshakable. You're here to be honest. You're here to be steady. And that only happens when you stop hiding ego behind the mask of strength. Because in this game, the most powerful thing you can say isn't, "I'm sure." It's, "I'm ready." Chapter 10. The fear of being wrong in public. It's one thing to take a loss in silence. It's another to take a loss where someone can see it. That's where the fear begins. Not just the fear of losing money. But the fear of losing face. Of being exposed. Of being seen as someone who doesn't have it all together. And in today's world, where every trader is in a group chat, a Discord, a forum, or a Telegram room, this fear becomes louder. Suddenly, every trade feels like a performance. Every red number. A judgment. Every drawdown. A whisper you imagine behind your back. Even if no one says a word, your ego hears them anyway. You enter a trade, and it turns red. You should close it. You know it's invalid. But you hesitate. Because someone's watching. And you don't want to admit it didn't work. You don't want to look impulsive. You don't want to look weak. So you hold. Not for the market, but for the image. You'd rather lose more and look confident than lose less and admit you were wrong. That's how far the ego will go to protect itself. I remember a trader who streamed his sessions. At first, it made him disciplined. He followed the rules. He respected risk. But slowly, something changed. He stopped cutting losers quickly. He started hesitating at exits. He couldn't bring himself to say the words, "I was wrong." Because now, trading wasn't just about execution. It was about identity. About being seen as the guy who gets it right. And that's when his edge collapsed. We think ego is always loud. But sometimes, it's just afraid. Afraid of embarrassment. Afraid of letting people down. Afraid of facing the moment when someone else sees what we already fear, that we're not as far along as we hoped. But here's the truth. Being seen doesn't make you weak. Hiding does. So what do? First, trade for yourself. If you share your trades, share them after. Protect your process from performance pressure. Second, normalize being wrong. Make it a practice. Say it often. Say it plainly. I was wrong on that one. Say it enough, and it loses its sting. And third, surround yourself with traders who value honesty over image. People who ask, "Did you follow your plan?" Not, "How much did you make?" Because in the long run, you don't build confidence by looking right. You build it by being real. Let your losses be quiet. Let them be clean. Let them be yours. And never trade just to protect an image. Because the market doesn't reward appearances. It rewards integrity. Chapter 11. The ego death of missing the move. There's a kind of pain in trading that doesn't show up on the statement. It doesn't come from a loss. It doesn't come from slippage, or size, or even a mistake. It comes from being right. And not being in. You marked the level. You planned the entry. You watched it unfold. Almost tick for tick. And still. You hesitated. Or you doubted. Or you stepped away for just a minute too long. And now the trade is gone. Without you. And there's nothing to do. That moment. When your plan plays out without you. It's more than frustration. It's ego death. Because you weren't wrong. You didn't misread the market. You knew. And still. You missed it. That's when the mind starts spinning. How could I let that go? What's wrong with me? I had it. It was mine. But it wasn't yours. It never was. Because until you click. Until you commit. Until you act. The trade isn't real. And your ego hates that. I worked with a trader once who was haunted by this exact moment. He would freeze on perfect setups. And when they moved without him, he would spiral. Not from greed. From shame. He told me, "I feel like a fraud. I saw the move, but I didn't take it." What kind of trader does that? But the truth is, a human one. Missing the move doesn't mean you're broken. It means you were scared. Or uncertain. Or still healing from the last time you were wrong. And that's not weakness. That's honesty. The problem isn't the missed move. It's what you do after. Because that's where the ego tries to reclaim power. It says chase it. Get back in. Now. Don't let this day slip away. And that's how one missed trade becomes 10 bad ones. Not because you're impulsive. But because you couldn't sit with powerlessness. Because you couldn't accept that the market gave the move. And you didn't take it. So how do you respond differently? First. Normalize the miss. Say it out loud, "I missed it." That happens. It's not the end of your journey. It's part of it. Second. Take note of why you missed it. Was it fear? Was it doubt? Was it indecision? Write it down. Learn from it. But don't punish yourself for being human. And third. Do nothing in the minutes that follow. No re-entry. No revenge click. No scramble. Just sit. Breathe. Observe. Because when you can sit through that moment without reacting, you win. Even if you miss the trade. There will always be another move. There will not always be another version of you who trades with clarity. Protect that version. Because the ego will shout, "You missed your chance," but the truth is, your chance is now. To stay composed. To stay calm. To stay in the game. Chapter 12. The ego that can't stop after a win. There's something almost sacred about a clean win. You planned it. You executed it. You followed your rules. You managed risk. And it worked. You hit your target. You feel calm. Proud. In sync. And then. Something strange happens. Instead of closing the platform, instead of logging the win and walking away, you feel the pull. One more. Just one. The charts still look good. The day still has time. You're already up. What's the harm? But deep down, it's not about the setup. It's about the feeling. You don't want to walk away because you're afraid to lose the feeling. That sensation of being in flow. That quiet high that comes with being right. It's not about the money anymore. It's about identity. Ego steps in. Quietly, confidently. And says, today, you can't lose. You're sharp. You're in tune. You're finally becoming that trader. And so, you stay. You take another trade. Then maybe another. And often. Not always, but often. The profits start to slip away. Not because the edge changed. But because you did. I've seen this over and over. A trader nails the first trade. Perfect entry. Clean target. Full size. It's a textbook example of professionalism. But instead of stopping, they keep going. The next setup isn't quite as clean. The third? A little forced. The fourth? Revenge for the third. And by the end of the day, the trader is flat. Or worse. And all they can say is I should have stopped after the first one. So why didn't they? Because ego doesn't want closure. It wants confirmation. 1 win feels good. 2 feels better. 3 starts to prove something. But here's the truth most traders ignore: you don't become more of a trader by doing more trades. You become more of a trader by knowing when to stop. Discipline isn't just about holding through drawdown. It's about protecting what you've earned. It's about recognizing the shift. When your desire to grow becomes a desire to prove. So what can you do? First, define the exit point for your day before you trade. Set a number. 1 and done. 2 and through. Whatever your structure is, make it sacred. Second, treat a green day like a closed door. Celebrate the process. Not the feeling. You don't need to ride the high. You need to protect the capital. And the clarity. And third, remind yourself every dollar you keep is a trade you didn't force. Every day you stop early is a day you respected your plan. That's not leaving money on the table. That's leaving ego at the door. You won. Don't let your ego convince you to trade your way back to zero. Just to feel like a hero. There is nothing braver in trading than walking away strong. Chapter 13. When control becomes an obsession. You think you're just trading the chart. You think you're analyzing, preparing, planning. But sometimes, you're doing something else entirely. You're trying to control what can't be controlled. You watch every tick. You redraw levels until they match the story you want to believe. You tweak your entry by 1 pip. Then again. Then again. Not because the plan changed. But because uncertainty is unbearable. You're not trying to trade. You're trying to protect yourself. From surprise. From confusion. From being wrong. You want the perfect entry, the perfect setup, the cleanest story possible. Because then, maybe. Just maybe. You won't have to feel the chaos of not knowing. That's the hidden obsession behind so much trader behavior. The illusion of control. If I watch enough screens, I'll never be caught off guard. If I analyze long enough, I'll never have to guess. If I wait for the perfect confirmation, I'll never have to feel risk. But that's not how this game works. Because no matter how good you are, you're still entering into the unknown. And if you can't accept that, you'll spend your whole career trying to eliminate discomfort, instead of learning to manage it. I remember working with a trader who never pulled the trigger unless 5 conditions lined up. Not 4. Not 4.5. 5. He would sit for hours, waiting. Overthinking. Hesitating. And even when the perfect setup came, he would flinch. Because his obsession with control had paralyzed him. He wasn't trading anymore. He was trying to build a system where nothing ever hurt. That system doesn't exist. The market is alive. It breathes. It bends. It fakes left, and goes right. You can't control it. And the harder you try, the more exhausted you become. Not from trading. From resisting reality. So how do you let go? First, redefine success. Success isn't about certainty. It's about preparedness. You're not here to control the market. You're here to meet it where it is. With structure, presence, and a plan. Second, create boundaries for how long you analyze. Time box your prep. Decide in advance what's enough. Because more information doesn't always mean more clarity. Sometimes, it just means more doubt. And third, welcome the unknown. Not as a threat, but as a teacher. Risk isn't something to avoid. It's something to respect. That's what real control looks like. Not in the market. In yourself. You will never master chaos. But you can master your response to it. And when you do, you don't need the market to behave. You just need to be ready. When it doesn't. Chapter 14. Why the need to win destroys strategy. Your strategy doesn't care about your emotions. It doesn't care if you're down for the day. It doesn't care if you haven't had a green week in a month. It doesn't care if you're overdue. It only works if you work it. Cleanly. Consistently. Without interference. But most traders don't realize when they've already broken it. They're still clicking the buttons. Still using the same indicators. Still looking at the same levels. But it's no longer the strategy that's in control. It's the need to win. And the need to win is quiet. It doesn't scream. It whispers. Take this early. You deserve one. Don't stop now. This one will work. Size up. You're due. It hijacks your thinking. Not with panic. But with urgency. Because when winning becomes personal, strategy becomes optional. You bend the rules. You justify the noise. You stretch the boundaries of what a valid setup really means. And slowly, without realizing it, you're no longer trading your system. You're trading your hope. I've seen traders backtest a plan for months. Beautiful structure. High IRR clear entries. And the moment they go live, it falls apart. Not because the edge is bad. Because they couldn't submit to it. They needed the win more than they needed to stay aligned. And so, when it was time to exit, they hesitated. When it was time to pass, they pushed. When it was time to stop, they chased. Not because they didn't know better. Because their need was louder than their knowledge. This is the great paradox of trading. You create a system to remove emotion. And then sabotage it with the very emotions you hope to silence. So how do you protect your strategy from your own mind? First, you make the strategy the goal. Not the win. Not the green number. You judge your success by how well you follow the rules. Not by how much you made. Second, log every deviation. Every time you break the rules. Note it. No excuses. No hiding. Because when you see the pattern in black and white, you can no longer pretend it's the system's fault. And third, accept this truth: needing to win is the fastest way to lose. The best traders don't trade to win. They trade to execute. And they trust the edge to do the rest. If your strategy is solid, then your only job is obedience. Not to feel right. Not to be impressive. Just to follow the rules that already work. Anything else is ego. Chapter 15. Surrender is not weakness. It's mastery. When you first start trading, you think the goal is control. Control over the charts. Control over your timing. Control over the outcome. And most of all, control over yourself. You think, if I get strong enough, smart enough, focused enough, then I'll win. But the deeper you go into this game, the more you realize something strange: the ones who last, the ones who thrive, aren't the ones who fight hardest. They're the ones who surrender. Not to the market. Not to randomness. But to reality. To truth. To limits. To imperfection. They stop needing to control everything. And start focusing on what actually matters. They let go of the outcome. They stop forcing the trade. They stop trying to predict every twist and turn. Because they finally understand mastery isn't about domination. It's about alignment. I worked with a trader who used to fight every red candle. Every retracement. Every trade that didn't immediately go green. He called it resilience. I called it resistance. Because he was never really in flow. He was always trying to push the market into doing what he wanted. And the market punished him for it. Not because it was cruel, but because he refused to surrender. When he finally stopped fighting. When he allowed the trade to breathe, when he respected his stop, when he accepted that sometimes no trade is the best trade. Everything changed. His results improved. But more importantly, his mind quieted. Because surrender doesn't mean defeat. It means peace. This is where ego ends. Not with some dramatic collapse. But with a quiet breath. You stop needing to win. You stop needing to prove. You stop needing to know. You simply show up, with a plan, with patience, with presence. And whatever the market brings. You respond. Not react. Respond. That's mastery. So what does surrender actually look like? It's closing the platform after one good trade. Even if there's more movement left. It's sticking to your stop. Without a second guess. Even if price reverses one tick after you exit. It's saying no trade today when nothing aligns. Even if you feel pressure to perform. It's accepting that some days you lose, some weeks you stall, and some months will humble you. And none of that defines your worth. The trader who surrenders isn't weak. They're unshakable. Because they no longer need the market to validate them. They've already made peace with what they can't control. And from that peace comes power. Final words. If you've come this far, then maybe something in this story felt familiar. Not just the setups. Not the rules. But the struggle underneath it all. The invisible pressure. The internal conflict. The quiet voice that says, I need to win. I need to prove it. I need to be right. That's the real fight, isn't it? Not with the market. With yourself. Because trading isn't just a financial journey. It's a personal one. It reveals your patterns. Your fears. Your ego. And in doing so, it gives you a chance to actually grow. Not just as a trader, but as a person. You started this path maybe thinking it was about freedom. Or money. Or mastery. But somewhere along the way, you realize those things don't come from the outside. They come from within. And the moment you stop needing to be right, the moment you stop chasing validation, is the moment you finally become a trader. Not someone who guesses. Not someone who proves. But someone who listens, prepares, responds. And lets go. That's not weakness. That's power. That's what trading, at its highest level, actually is. A mirror. And maybe a way home.